It's 3:30 in the morning, and my 7-year-old son is in severe pain, sobbing in my arms. We were told it's growing pains, but he's not growing out of it. Despite trips to many doctors, an accurate diagnosis won't come for another 23 years. As a teen, after being told for years that nothing was wrong while continuing to suffer from intense pain, he gave up on doctors, began self-medicating, and developed a substance use disorder. Thankfully, he didn't overdose on drugs he got on the street. It took going to jail to do that. When he's 25, once again, he screams in pain, this time as he lays on the sticky floor of a commercial kitchen where he was working. He's a Le Cordon Bleu graduate, has had a passion for culinary since he was 2 years old, and his work ethic is fierce. He's worked through pain before, but this is extreme. It's after hours, and this time is different. The intense pain isn't because of misdiagnosis. It's because of intentional denial of prescribed medications and prohibition of medical treatment in the county jail. He'd been arrested for possession of 7 Percocet. If he'd had a prescription for those Percocet, none of this would have happened, but his confidence in doctors was slim, so he'd skipped that part. While his case was processed, he had sought medical help and had been doing better until, upon checking into jail, all of his legal medications had been taken from him, despite promises that they'd be administered. Multiple requests for the meds were denied, and it became clear that further pleas would lead to negative repercussions while he was behind bars. So now he's in crisis. Huber law allowed him release to work, but if he doesn't return to jail within the next hour, Huber will be revoked, he'll be completely confined, and he'll lose his job. Inmates aren't allowed to seek private medical care, so he returned to jail with uncontrollable pain. He found access to methadone and took it to ease the pain and get some sleep. The next morning, when I saw the call from the jail, I hoped it was to acknowledge his pain and allow us to get him some help. Instead, it was to report that he hadn't woken up that morning and was in the ER. He'd overdosed. The jail didn't carry Narcan, so delays in treatment added to the danger. Upon our arrival at the ER, the attending physician didn't know we heard his comment. The jail brought him in. We didn't have faith that our son, struggling for his life, would get the best care. So that's why I'm here. I'm an attorney. Until it smacked me in the face personally, I thought I understood drug policy. I knew there were some issues, but like many people, really paying attention or doing anything about it hadn't become a top priority. Now, I wished I'd paid closer attention, and I had to ask myself why we've largely ignored the large-scale devastation and are still operating based on 1930s protocols. I thought about 9/11 and how fast policy changed after that. We saw the pictures. Nearly 3,000 people lost their lives. It scared us. In 2022, over 110,000 people died of overdose in the United States alone. That's the equivalent of a 9/11 attack every 10 days. Since 1999, over 1 million Americans have died of overdose, and the fatalities aren't slowing down. Yet, we hold on to the punitive policies, despite their failure. Could that be partly because policymakers and the general public can see themselves as casualties of terrorism, but don't see personal risk from the drug war? Until we all realize that this war is on all of our doorsteps and that we're all at risk, urgency to change the law is lacking, even if it's not working, and even if it's killing people. I'm here to tell you that even if you've never tried an illegal drug, the war on drugs can, will, and likely has put your health, your family, your money, and your safety at risk. My son was deprived of medical care and medications in jail, but those prohibitions have been expanded to all of us. Have you or someone you know been denied pain medications that have worked successfully for years? Have you had to suffer through surgery? Or do you know someone with stage 4 cancer who was deprived of pain medications? You could be one car accident or one medical diagnosis away from being denied proven medications to alleviate pain and to aid with healing. And that protocol is not supported by science or medicine. The evidence is now indisputable that patients using prescribed medications make up less than 1% of opioid overdose deaths. Most overdoses are from mixing drug combinations or from street drugs. Pain patients with scripts from their doctors are not the primary issue, yet attempted solutions have been directed at them. Opioid prescriptions are at a 21-year low, while opioid overdoses have skyrocketed. When patients are deprived of legal pain medications, they're driven to the streets, where tainted drugs are killing them. These policies have also led to increases in suicide rates for pain patients. The very policies intended to protect patients from addiction are killing them. Attorneys, politicians, judges, and the DEA are now making medical decisions for all of us without consulting our physicians or knowing our personal medical needs. At a time when many are seeing the obvious failure of drug policy, the war on drugs has been expanded to include legal prescription medications. These are the results of policy directed by emotion over science, by politics over medicine. The war on medications also creates roadblocks to getting the most effective treatment for substance use disorder. Medications used to treat addiction decrease the risk of overdose by half, yet these medications are still prohibited by many jails, prisons, drug courts, probation programs, sober houses, and even treatment facilities. There has been some progress. CDC prescribing guidelines have been revised to give medical providers more authority. But state regulations, risks of license revocation, and fear of the DEA continue to impact medical care. Fentanyl test strips that save lives are finally legal in many states, and Narcan is now available over the counter. But it's taken over 1 million deaths before these changes were allowed. Too often, progress is just ending policies that have created harm, not adopting policies to actually help with solutions. Let's be honest about the war on drugs. When we make a drug illegal, we're saying lock them up, put them in a cage. Kids experiment, and that cage could have your child's name on it. Studies have shown that being arrested during young adulthood increases risk of addiction, decreases chances of marriage and annual earnings for life, and triples the chance of incarceration as an adult. By the age of 23, over 1/3 of Americans have been arrested for something more serious than a traffic violation, largely due to drug charges. Since 1980, the number of incarcerated Americans has quadrupled. 1 in 3 Americans now have a criminal record. Kofi Annan, former Secretary General of the United Nations, says it well. We all want to protect our families from the potential harm of drugs. But if our children do develop a drug problem, surely we will want them cared for as patients in need of treatment and not branded as criminals. I'm an estate planning attorney, and part of my practice has become helping families to navigate the financial aspects of addiction in the family. I've witnessed a financial drain on families, partially because too often the benefits of treatment paid for by families is undone by the criminal justice system. A mother contacted me saying, "I'm so angry. The last time I checked with the inpatient treatment that the court would approve, the waiting list was 4 months. So we sold some assets to be able to afford to pay the bond so we could bring our son home and try the medication the drug court wouldn't let him take. He's been doing great, started school, and is working 2 jobs. A bed opened up today at the rehab, and the DA wants him to go into treatment, but the treatment center won't allow the medications that are working for him, and going into treatment will end his jobs and his school. What he's doing is working, but if we don't do what the prosecutor is demanding, he'll send our son to prison for 2 years. This is crazy. What do we do?" This is the reality of the war on drugs, and this isn't a unique occurrence. Shouldn't our goal be self-sufficiency? Drug policy keeps people from becoming self-supporting, destroying self-respect, and adding costs for taxpayers, all while increasing addiction and overdose rates. Progress doesn't require more taxpayer money or more punitive policies, Just end the destruction. Allow families to help their loved ones. Allow doctors to help their patients. Allow law enforcement to focus on violent crime. And allow taxpayers to keep more of their own money. We've heard a lot about defunding police, and we've seen increased crime because of it. This movement began in response to the war on drugs. When over a third of the population has a criminal record, the result is distrust and fear of police. Unfortunately, the movement didn't focus specifically on the policy that caused the majority of those arrests, but expanded into lack of prosecution for violent crime and demonizing all law enforcement. This war has impacted safety for all of us and has made life more difficult for police. Officer suicides now outnumber line-of-duty deaths. Homelessness has escalated largely because of criminal records barring access to housing and untreated addiction and mental illness. SWAT raids, primarily looking for drugs, have increased by 15,000% from the late 1970s to today, resulting in 50,000 to 80,000 raids in the U.S. every year, traumatizing adults and children, and killing over 10,000 pets annually. The war on drugs is the best funding source for drug cartels and, by extension, funds terrorism, human trafficking, and many other criminal enterprises. Many of those coming through our borders have been driven out of their homes by cartels, where either they work for the cartels, they die, or they leave. Some policymakers have suggested military movement against the cartels. When El Chapo was arrested, Mexican heroin production increased by 37%, and violence increased due to competition to fill the gap left by El Chapo's absence. Even if invading another country didn't create a host of other issues, attacking cartels would only leave vacancies to be filled, resulting in increased turf wars, violence, and innocent victims. So what do we do about it? To defeat the cartels, wipe out their markets, end the drug war, legalize and regulate all drugs. History repeats itself, and we can learn from that. Alcohol prohibition required a constitutional amendment. No amendment authorized drug prohibition. The 18th Amendment creating alcohol prohibition was repealed by the 21st Amendment, essentially in 15 words. The 18th Article of Amendment to the Constitution of the United States is hereby repealed. Those words ended an era that had fueled organized crime, that had seen people die because of tainted moonshine, that had escalated crime due to incentives created by underground product and the lack of legal methods of resolving disputes. Sound familiar? Drug prohibition has followed the same path as alcohol prohibition, financing the cartels, losing our children to overdose due to tainted street drugs, escalating crime due to incentives created by underground markets and lack of legal methods of resolving disputes. Let's make drug prohibition follow in one more footstep of alcohol prohibition. Let's end it. When drug prohibition began, we didn't heed the lessons of history. After over 50 years of failure, it's time that we do. The good news is that we're at the best time in history to treat addiction and reduce overdose rates if we only have the resolve to apply science and medicine, to stop punishing patients, and to let families and individuals heal without government blockades. When we treat substance use disorder in the way we treat other medical issues, astounding progress is made. What would success rates for diabetes be if we prohibited use of insulin, told families that advocating for patients would be harmful, and if a diabetic relapsed and ate a candy bar, we put them behind bars? What if judges, prosecutors, and the DEA dictated treatment, and physicians who didn't follow mandates were jailed or lost their licenses? How much would rates of diabetes escalate? How enraged would we be? If we don't face our mistakes and embrace current science and medicine, the devastation will continue, and the next casualty could be our own family. When you hear about a proposed policy, ask yourself, if this was applied to any other health issue, would it make sense? Many well-meaning policies don't meet that test. Drug courts may cut incarceration rates, but still apply punitive measures and fear. Many prohibit medications or mandate one-size-fits-all treatment. And relapse often leads to longer periods of incarceration than without drug court. Ankle bracelets sound humane, but increase stigma and lead to time behind bars due to loss of a wireless signal. Short jail sentences lead to increased risk of overdose and a myriad of other issues. Stopgap measures don't work, and they kill people. Our son survived the overdose, but his journey hasn't been easy. The overdose escalated already existing health issues. Probation mandates prohibited use of medications to treat his substance use disorder and blocked working with an addiction specialist. Ultimately, when it became clear that something had to change, we defied probation by taking him to the specialist and getting him on medications, risking incarceration since this was a probation violation. No one should have to risk prosecution to seek medical care. He was finally diagnosed and treated for an autoimmune disease, ankylosing spondylitis, that explained the intense joint pain. Unfortunately, another symptom of the disease is iritis, red eyes, that look very similar to bloodshot eyes from drug use. You can imagine the challenges created by a criminal record and red eyes. Just walking into a store during a flare can risk arrest, and has put him behind bars for days at a time on multiple occasions, again barred from legal medications, while tests were run that cleared him. Ongoing trauma and stress escalate autoimmune issues. Our son has pursued his culinary passion as an executive chef, but the war on drugs still restricts him daily, impacting medical care, housing, travel, and career opportunities. He has an intense fear of police and of being forbidden access to medications that he needs medically. He's been past his addiction issues for nearly 10 years, but this war won't let go. So I'm here to ask for your help, for my family, for my clients' families, and for all the other families who've suffered at the hands of this war, either directly or indirectly. You have more power than you may realize to influence policy and to impact lives. Please be compassionate and non-judgmental and understand that you may not know the full story. The physician in the ER likely thought little before he spoke, but I remember the sting of his comments nearly 15 years later. A kind word can save a life and can give hope to those who have none left. If you're a parent dealing with a child's addiction, your kids need you. They're not only dealing with potential substance use disorder, they're dealing with an incredibly harsh and dysfunctional system. Be an advocate, even when you're told not to be. There will be a time when we will look back at the era of the war on drugs as a dark blight on history. The questions are, how long will this failed war go on? How many people will die or sit in cages as their lives pass? How many families will grieve the fatalities and the waste of life created by this war? It's time to end the war on drugs. It's time to end the war on us. Let's do it now. Please share the knowledge. Together, we can make a difference.